This is a board. And if I prescribe to the current phrasing that's going around the woodworking world right now, all I need to do is just get started. Grab some tools, grab this board, make some cuts, glue it up, and bam, I've got a thing. But the problem with that mentality is that this board has infinite potential. This board can be anything that I want it to be. And as a result, this board can become tremendously intimidating, almost to the point of being debilitating. I don't know how to get started. I don't know what it's going to be. And as a result, I don't get started. And recently, I undertook a very simple project, something that should have only taken me a couple of hours, but ended up kicking my ass, to the point where something that should have taken a couple of hours ended up being 7 weeks. And if I'm being honest with you, that project taught me valuable lessons, of which I'm going to be sharing with you. 6 things that we need to do before we start any project that not only will help us get started, but more importantly, will give us a greater degree of actually finishing what we start. So if you're anything like me and just get started isn't as easy as it sounds, then stick around. Hopefully, I can help you out. My name is Jared, and this is Vulgar Woodworks. Before I get into the method that is going to be the bulk of this video, I have a quick little ask of you. If you feel so inclined to comment at any point in this video, please start your comment with, "I struggle to start because." And that way, if I gloss over something or flat out omit something that might be relevant to you, perhaps somebody else can help you out in the comments. It's my hope, it's always my hope, that the comment section is actually a place of support and learning. So I can't think of everything. If I forget or don't mention something at all that might be relevant to you, ask or at least offer up a little bit of vulnerability in your making life to the rest of the commenters, and let's see if we can actually create a supportive place in the comments. Remember, I struggle to start because. Step number 1 couldn't be any easier. It's what we affectionately refer to as a brain dump. And all you need to do to conduct a brain dump is have something to write with, something to write on. Now, I'm an advocate of old school tactile experiences because I think we have a better idea of what it was that we actually wrote down as opposed to doing it digitally. I also don't trust digital anything in that Google Drives are black holes, clouds can dissipate. I don't trust digital. This way, doing it in a comp book like this, you know what it looks like. Hopefully, you put things back where they belong. My comp book, it just sits in the top drawer of my tool chest. And then that way, if I get another idea, I can just scribble it down in here. Okay? Tactile, pen and paper, and list everything. Doesn't matter if it's a big project or it's a small project, an expensive project, or a scrap wood budget project. It doesn't matter. List everything because we just don't want to lose what we have in our head. When we write it down, we're more likely to remember it, and better yet, we can continually reference it. Step number 2. Now that we have our massively long list, we need to categorize it. And you can see I have little check marks next to a handful of projects. Now, one thing that I firmly believe in, and this is going to be a central theme moving forward in this video, is keep it simple. I believe that once you have done your brain dump, you should categorize into 2 categories. Your first category is going to be your priority category, your necessity projects, the things that should have been done yesterday. And everything else is just going to go in the I'll get to it when I get to it category. We're not going to just leave them there in perpetuity to never be done. We just realize that they aren't a priority. So speak to whoever is going to have an investment in the projects that you are going to undertake and then make the decision. What is it that needs to get done? Now that you've categorized your projects, I have a couple of tips as far as that priority column is concerned. The first tip is keep it to 5 or fewer, okay? 5 is attainable. If you're thinking like you're gonna light the woodworking world on fire and you're gonna do 10, 15, 20 projects in a year, that is going to quickly make woodworking not that much fun, and secondarily to that, you could potentially burn out and just not want to do it at all. 5 or fewer, that's attainable. Secondarily, I always think you should put one big project in there, one massive project. If you're anything like me, you have a lot of DIY type projects that you want to do for your house that require a lot of time and a lot of effort. So Include one of those. That way you feel a sense of accomplishment, and that big, massive DIY list that you have, you can slowly chip away at it. Thirdly, don't put anything new on the list until you're done with the original 5. This should not become a self-perpetuating, never-ending cycle. Give yourself time to step back and appreciate what you've done and recharge. And then lastly, is make whatever priority list you come up with, make it visible. Mine's sitting right there, okay? Slapped it right up against a whole bunch of melamine boards, which is part of my I'll get to it later list. It's right there, it's visible, I can reference it, and I know what my priorities are. It's all great and fine to keep it in your comp book and everything like that and reference it this way, but I just think it's a lot better if it's quite literally staring you in the face and telling you, hey, get your act together and let's get some shit done. We have completed the 2 easiest steps of this whole method. We have done the brain dump, we have categorized our projects, and we have chosen the 5 that we deem to be the most deserving of our time. Now comes the hard part, and this is the part where we all stall out, where we struggle to get started. And I struggle with this too. Design and planning. Now I'm going to tackle planning first because that's the easier of the 2. This whole woodworking thing, it essentially boils down to a handful of steps. We usually start with just rough cutting our parts and pieces. We give ourselves a little bit of room so that we can navigate around defects in a board, and we give ourselves a little bit of extra room in case something goes awry, but we rough cut. And then we start the milling process, trying to get our boards flat and squared. And pro tip, when it comes to planing your boards, the pencil trick, that's all great and fine to see whether or not a board is actually flat, but guaranteed to get you flat, put the sticker of your favorite YouTuber onto your board, then run it through the planer. That's guaranteed to get you flat. Next, we then go over to a table saw or a chop saw or something, and we start cutting down to final dimensions. We're getting very, very close to. Next, we then go into whole joinery mode. What are we gonna do? Dovetails, pocket holes, blind dovetails, some sort of fancy through mortise type joinery. I don't know, but we go into joinery mode. Next, we should be towards the end of our project, so that means sanding. The wonderful task of sanding. And then once we've gone through that process, now we're applying finish and we're doing final assembly. Easy peasy, right? With experience, the planning becomes a lot easier. You just know what the order of operations is gonna be. But in order to plan, you have to have a design. And this is where it gets really challenging. So when it comes to design, because this is Vulgar Woodworks, I'm gonna say some controversial things. I have said it numerous times up to this point in this video that I believe that keeping it simple is always the best course of action. However, with that being said, there is this urge amongst us as adults, and more importantly as adult woodworkers, where we want to overcomplicate things, and to a degree we want to overcompensate. We're looking for validation. We think that we just have to create the next greatest thing, when in reality we don't. We just need things to be done simply and effectively. And really, guys, the ugly truth here is that most of the people who are going to come in contact with the things that we make, they're going to think we're fucking magicians. We can make 2 pieces of wood go together and it looks good. And a lot of times the people who receive the items that we make, they're just happy that we made it for them. So when we get hung up on the idea of design, I think a lot of times we're not concerned with whether or not it appeals to us. We're attempting to validate ourselves to others. And we don't need to. I sure as shit don't need to. I know that what I do is of a certain level of quality, and I prescribe to this keep it simple mentality, so I try to just let the wood do the talking. I'm not trying to force the issue. So the project that I mentioned earlier in the video that absolutely kicked my ass, the reason why it kicked my ass was because I was doing the exact opposite of what I'm saying right now. I wanted to create this crazy ass through mortise type joint, and I had never done that before. And then I kicked around the whole idea of maybe blind dovetails, which I had never done before. So I'm racking my head for 6 weeks trying to figure out some type of joinery that will then validate me to the internet community, when in reality, the person who was going to receive the box wouldn't give a good goddamn about what type of joint I used. They just needed it to hold a 5x7 card. I get it. I realize that sounded like a little bit of a rant, and to a degree it was. But you gotta just keep things simple. Basic forms of joinery are acceptable for probably 9 out of 10 projects that we create. Using exotic woods, that doesn't make your project any better. That just makes you a pretentious woodworker. And you can't do that. That's my job. All of the other things that we attempt to do in our woodworking lives where we're trying to kind of like force the issue, I would say just stop, step back, and get back to the whole functionality aspect. You can always have a fair amount of form in a project simply because of the wood. The wood is the form. The function is exactly that. And you have to ask yourself, if all you need to do is just make a box or a table or anything else, how complicated does it really need to be? All right, we've done the easy things and we've gotten the hard part out of the way. Now it should be downhill. The next step is to just simply budget. Now, budgeting is twofold. There's the financial side of things. We should know what board foot prices are, who has what material, so on and so forth, and we should have a list. I'm a big fan of lists. We should have a fluid list of all of those board foot prices so we can at least get a rough budget for what our project is going to cost. But more importantly, we need to be able to budget our time. Now, I think it's fair to assume that the majority of you who are on that side of the screen are not professional woodworkers. You're not dedicating 50, 60, 80 hours a week to being in the shop. I certainly don't do that. So the rule of thumb is, for me as a hobbyist woodworker who has a life, has a family, has a career that all need attention, is that regardless of whatever the project is that's on my necessity list, I am going to budget 6 weekends. Weekends. 6 weekends usually gets me across the finish line. Now, obviously, if it's a much, much larger project, then you're going to need to budget time accordingly for what you think that project is going to take. And to circle back to, again, why I say only 5 projects on that necessity list is because if each of those projects was to actually take 6 weekends to complete, that's 30 out of 52 weeks in a year. 2/3 of a year to get whatever you've got on that list done. I think that's a fair and reasonable amount of time. Now, if you've got all the time in the world, you're retired or you've won the lotto or whatever the hell it is and you ain't got no job, feel free to dedicate more time. But for most of us, we're weekend warriors, we're home hobbyists. 6 weekends is kind of a nice round number to be able to finish off whatever projects we need to finish. Okay, now we're ready to get started. The next step is simply to be single-minded. So I think this is often a topic that is under-discussed when it comes to just getting started, and more importantly, how we cross the finish line with our projects. When I say we have to be single-minded, I mean exactly that. We have to be selfish with our time. We have to focus on one thing at a time. I have done this before where I've gotten myself into a situation where I've got 3, 4, 5 things going on at once, and that is a recipe for not finishing any of it. I need to focus on one thing. More than likely, you do too. Dedicate whatever bandwidth you have for that project and see it through. If you run into mistakes, correct the mistakes. If you have scheduling issues, don't just shelf the project and then start something new and just say, I'll come back to it. No, be committed. You started, do your damnedest to finish. And if there are other things, life events, whatever going on that prevent you from working, accept them for what they are. But when you are ready to come back, you focus on the thing that you started. Don't start something new. The final step, we have gotten started, and more importantly, we have finished what we've set out to finish. We need to take time after every single project to recharge and reflect. Now, from the recharge standpoint, I just simply think we shouldn't be in the shop 24/7, 365 a year. I just don't think we should do that. We should find time to get away from our shops so that we then appreciate the time that we actually have. And more importantly, we're focused. Secondarily, I think part of the recharge aspect is the time for us to reflect. We need to look at each project objectively and say, this is where I struggled. This is where I grew. I could have done this a little bit better. This turned out okay. Don't compare yourselves to others. Remember that who you are making the project for is probably going to be deeply appreciative of your time, your effort, and your skill. And in the end, if it did or does whatever it is that you set out for that project to do, then it's mission accomplished. And now my time here in this video is drawing to an end. The boxes, they're finished. They absolutely kicked my ass. I had to relearn a lot of what I have described to you in this video the hard way. But they're done. I got started. And more importantly, I got finished. And I think, actually, I know, because by the time you see this, the boxes will have already reached their destination. The person who received these absolutely loves them. So I'm happy that he's happy, and I get to cross something else off my list.